everyone, welcome to Switchblade Sisters Social Club, the true crime podcast where two friends exploit their worst fears for your entertainment.
You're welcome.
I'm Dee, a writer and podcaster.
And I'm Isla from Criminally Good Books, a true crime and crime fiction bookshop in York.
Follow us on all the socials.
Except for X, obviously.
Or have a look at our website, switchbladesisterssocialclub.com.
Check them out for all our latest episodes, events, deals, and other weird stuff.
Listeners' discretion advised.
Shit. So we are having a week-long mid-season break because of life and everything. I don't like leaving you high and dry. So I'm back today with another debrief. Some of you might remember between our seasons, I supplied you with little bite-sized episodes called the Dee-Brief, which I thought was really clever because my name is Dee and they are short. And this one looks at the true story of Margareta Zell, known as Mata Hari. And this one is for both Sam and for Vicky, who I had an awesome time with at Manchester Punk Festival, Manchester. So both of them like their wartime stories, it seems. I'm going to be exploring her life as a dancer and the allegations of espionage during World War I. So, in the early hours of the 15th of October 1917, the exotic dancer Mata Hari mounted the steps to the firing squad in Paris. A century later, we're still asking questions. Was she a spy or was she a scapegoat? Let's start at the beginning, shall we? Margaretha Gertruda Zell was born in the Netherlands on the 7th of August, 1876. And her childhood was fairly comfortable until her father's hat shop business collapsed in 1889. So she would have been around 13 years old. And at 18, she answered a newspaper ad, which was the Tinder of the times, and married a Dutch army officer, Captain Rudolf MacLeod, which doesn't sound very Dutch. But anyways, she ended up moving to colonial Java, so what we know as Indonesia. And in Indonesia, Margareta actually immersed herself in the local culture, studying Javanese temple dances and often performing at military balls. Now, that can't have been usual behavior at the time for these colonizers and their families to actually try to learn from the culture and indulge in it and then perform it. I don't know. While she was there, she gave birth to two children, Norman, who sadly died a few years later, and daughter Non. The marriage was unhappy. MacLeod was reportedly abusive, and by 1902, Margareta separated and she returned to Europe with her young daughter, Non, after her older son had passed away. And she was seen there in Europe as exotic, as she had rebranded as a Javanese dancer. So it's fetishizing cultures here, and it is very imperialistic, and it is really very gross. But by 1903, she adopted the stage name Mata Hari, which is Malay for Eye of the Day or Sunrise. And she was basically dancing burlesque, and it was seen as incredibly risque for the time. Even in Paris, she was seen as a sensual sensation. And she marketed herself as a Javanese princess, or sometimes she was open about being Dutch, but other times people thought, is she Indian? Is she Japanese even, people thought? Was she royalty? Was she a courtesan? There were rumors everywhere about her origins. She spoke several languages fluently, Dutch, French, English, German, a bit of Javanese even. So later this would prove very suspicious, but also very useful during the war. And it helped her with the ruse of being seen as this international princess, traveler, etc., etc. She had lots of really rich European aristocrats, military officers, and so forth. Yeah. She had lots of wealthy European aristocrats and officers clamoring to sponsor her. They basically wanted to treat her as a high-class courtesan under the pretense of sponsoring the arts. She counted amongst her lovers many generals, nobles, and even artists like Toulouse-Lautrec. Through the 1900s, Mata Hari toured Europe, and in 1905-06, she danced in Vienna, Berlin, and Monte Carlo. In Berlin, she became attached to a wealthy German officer, Alfred Kiepert, who adoringly financed her. With Kiepert, she hobnobbed with German generals and even royalty. Her act remained exotic. She would always have a cloud of incense and slowly drape her silken veils around her. And it was seen as very sensuous, and she considered it a sacred Indian dance. I don't know how Indians would feel about that. But the novelty soon faded, and by 1910, Paris audiences were growing bored of her. Everyone had seen her, she'd done the tours, and she was no longer, and I hate this, seen as youthful. She briefly married wealthy French banker Edouard Clunet in 1906 for convenience, but separated soon after. And as Clunet's money drive died up, she resumed performing into the 1910s. By 1913, at the ripe old elderly age of 37, in Berlin, she was accused of public indecency during a raucous dance. And her lovers included people like the French Minister of War, Albert Lafitte, which came out in her trial, and other high-ranking officers of multiple nations. In her letters to her lovers, what we learned in this podcast? Never write letters to your lovers. She sometimes hinted at intelligence intrigue. Shit. In 1916, she wrote to a French intelligence contact, Jean Hallar, sorry. It's not a usual French word. It's not my French, guys. Requesting safe passage to a spa for health reasons, but in reality, she wanted to visit a wounded Russian officer, Captain Vladimir Maslov, who she'd fallen in love with. Yet her reputation grew. Press dubbed her the Queen of Spies, exotic siren, the beautiful spy who died for love. These sensational headlines conflated myth and fact. It also made her a rubbish spy, in my opinion, if everyone knew about her and was suspicious of her. And then finally, in the summer of 1914, war broke out. Margaretha, as a Dutch citizen, was neutral, but neutral status could cut both ways. It let her travel, but it also aroused spy suspicions. The stage was set for these allegations of espionage. By World War One, as World War One erupted in 1914, Mata Hari resided partly in neutral Netherlands and partly touring with her dance act. Her favorite resort was Vittel in France, where Maslov, her Russian military officer, was recovering. And in late 1914 and 15, she crossed front lines under Red Cross protections. Neutral Dutch papers allowed her to have such luxury of travel during the war. But each border crossing raised suspicions. Why is this woman traveling around so much? In December 1915, returning from Holland to France, she was detained by British police in Folkestone, England. They searched her belongings and found nothing serious, but flagged her as suspicious. They actually called her in their reports, and I quote, dangerous international woman, which has got to be our new merch. Isla, make a note. Dangerous international woman merch coming your way. Intelligence noted her conflicting reasons for travel, and the British circulated warnings if Mata Hari returned, she was to be arrested. So they obviously didn't like this woman, a single woman traveling around on her own across borders, across different army lines, and so forth. Meanwhile, in France, exhausted by war, everyone was growing paranoid, and in spring 1916, Captain Georges Ladoux of French intelligence covertly approached Mata Hari. He asked her to spy for France, offering 1 million francs to support her and Maslov. She agreed, motivated to save Maslov, and this is documented in French files that were opened decades later, so weren't available at the time. Her mission was to use her access to German officers. The first target was a German attaché, Major Arnold Kahl, in Madrid. But her attempts were clumsy. He suspected her and then fed her false information because, again, she is a shit spy. By 1916, France and Britain were desperate for any edge, and in this climate, Mata Hari's profile, female, mobile, multilingual, with German and French connections, made her a figure of suspicion, whether fairly or not. Key intercepted communications occurred, and in basically shit. In early 1917, British codebreakers had cracked many German codes, but on the 13th of February 1917, they intercepted a German radio transmission from Madrid, where the German Major Arnold Kahl is. It contained two crucial clues: a German message referring to agent code H21 and using the pronoun she. The French intelligence immediately suspected Mata Hari, as Ledoux's files later showed. They'd intercepted this telegram that said, in a quote, "Agent H21 meets tonight. She carries sealed papers." This code word would become legend. Evidence suggested it may have been planted, though, by Cal to entrap her. As Cal later revealed, he knowingly used a broken code to lure French suspicion. He sent those messages. He wanted the enemy to read them. In short, he was setting a trap for the Mata Hari. By early 1917, fervor was high. War-weary France was seeking scapegoats for recent defeats. French propaganda minister, propaganda minister, Aristide Briand, and the press demanded traitors. They wanted scapegoats. Although no shell dropping of spies was ever proven, Mata Hari became the perfect exotic villain. And yes, the word exotic is problematic. On the night of 12 to 13 February 1917, French agents moved in. Mata Hari was staying at the Hotel Élysée Palace in Paris. Under cover of darkness, Captain Ledoux personally oversaw her arrest. According to accounts, she was actually in the bathtub when she was taken prisoner, and she had asked, "What have I done?" Legally, her trial was swift for what it was. She was sent to military court at the Hotel des Invalides. The charge, espionage for Germany and treason, citing coded communications and testimony from French informants. In reality, all of the evidence was circumstantial. The trial was closed to the public and sealed for 100 years. Mata Hari's own attorney, who was age 74, was not even allowed to cross-examine prosecutors' witnesses. This is a quote from someone supposedly defending her. "Never was any woman more unsuitable as a spy," insisted General Messimy, a former French war minister at the trial. He still found her morally repugnant, however, so he's basically saying she couldn't do it even if she wanted to. By July 1917, the verdict was in. Guilty. She was sentenced to death by firing squad. The courtroom reaction was mixed. Some spectators fainted, others wept at the inevitable sentence. As one French officer later wrote, "We had to shoot her, even though no real crimes were proved." This excerpt actually comes from the memoirs of the prosecutor André Mornay. 3 months later, on the morning of the 15th of October, her 41st birthday, she was taken to the Bois de Vincennes. According to an eyewitness, reporter Henry Wales, Mata Hari remained calm. The official account is terse. She died at 6:15 a.m. by firing squad. Her final wish was reportedly unanswered. She asked to see the French flag as she fell. It was denied. Her last words were unrecorded, which just feels like a further indignity. In war or peacetime, Mata Hari's trial would rank as a miscarriage of justice. Today, historians describe it as a judicial travesty. There's no direct evidence that she transmitted any strategic secrets. The proof, telegrams, gifts, and so forth, were hearsay and circumstantial. Indeed, many intelligence veterans later admitted Mata Hari gave nothing of military value. And that was on the French side as well as the German. Key pieces of evidence collapsed under scrutiny. The intercepted telegrams came from Cal with broken code. Cal's messages were designed to set the dogs on one of their own, as one memoir puts it. By all accounts, there are massive intelligence failures on the Somme, and French generals wanted someone to blame for the loss of life and the strategic loss in the war. Mata Hari's trial provided a convenient spectacle, a diversion tactic. The reality was, code-breaking records show she likely spied only for France, delivering trivial information. Indeed, newly released archives opened only in 1985 showed French intelligence actually recruited her in 1916. She confessed after arrest that she'd taken a measly sum from Germany via Cal, but insisted she used it as a double agent for France. Yet Ledoux publicly disavowed her from the moment British suspicion surfaced. It wasn't until decades later that documents confirmed she'd spent money on Maslov and only passed on worthless news. Mata Hari was shot not for what she did, but for what she was, A foreign woman flaunting her sexuality, writes historian Pat Shipman in his book, which was excellent. Sources at the end as well as in the show notes, FYI. After her execution, no one came to claim her body. It was sent for medical dissection. There was no state funeral, no apology. Germany even formally exonerated her in 1930, but France has largely remained silent. In short, the evidence for Mata Hari as a deadly spy is very weak. Evidence against her was manufactured or misinterpreted. This ambiguity makes her story endlessly debated to this day. But let's consider her legacy. Over a century later, she still remains an enduring cultural icon. Her name is shorthand for seductive spy. She inspired dozens of books, movies, operas, even a rock musical. But scholarly work is catching up to a separate history. Skip. But we will always have questions. Is she innocent? Is she guilty? Historians disagree. Some argue that Mata Hari was innocent of spying, while others say she was naive and did attempt espionage, albeit poorly. The official French records, once secret, still leave gaps. For example, they don't have a verbatim trial transcript. Much of it is from memoirs and press. There's also the scapegoat theory. Many assert that she was scapegoated for French failures, wartime leaders needed an enemy within, and a flashy foreigner fit the bill. And there's also the gender factor. Would she have been treated in the same fashion if she was a man? Arguably not. Her case opens debates on gender and honor. She was accused not just of spying, but of moral corruption. Today, Mata Hari is often viewed sympathetically, a tragic figure of World War I. Mata Hari's story reminds us that history is often told by victors and by the media. Here was a woman caught in a geopolitical crossfire and swept up in myth-making. Whether spy or scapegoat, her life raises timeless questions about war, about gender, and about truth. So, my favorite book on this topic was Femme Fatale, Love, Lies, and the Unknown Life of Mata Hari by Pat Shipman in 2007, available at Criminally Good Books. We also have a bunch of other sources. Julie Wheelwright wrote on The Fatal Lover, Mata Hari and the Myth of Women in Espionage, Mata Hari, The True Story, Russell Warren Howe, and then a bunch of other articles and so forth that I will put in the show notes. Thank you so much, sexy listeners. Normal service will resume next week. Bye!
Like this episode? Want more? Come visit me, Isla, at Criminally Good Books in the heart of York. We're an independent bookshop dedicated entirely to crime. From cosy mysteries to gritty thrillers, historical whodunits to juicy true crime. We've got signed editions, special gifts and plenty of recommendations for your next obsession. We also host a bunch of awesome author events. Can't make it in person? Visit us online at criminallygoodbooks.co.uk.